Hello and good morning, British and American culture students. We have a lot to talk about, as usual. I'd like to just take a moment and talk about the course and the content. Some people have emailed me some questions. I know there's a lot of material. Every semester, there are a few students that say, wow, there's too much and it's too difficult. Well, it's a big topic, British culture and American culture, and we can't cover everything, but I'm trying to emphasize certain aspects and certain events so that you can have a sort of basic understanding of British culture and American culture for your other classes. When you study any literature or linguistics in English, it's very helpful to know, have a cultural background, which many of you don't. I had to learn many of these things myself, so now I'm passing it on to you. There's going to be a lecture next week that's a midterm review, okay? So I'm going to post a kind of list of some main points and ideas that you need to study on the cyber campus. It's just kind of, week by week what we've looked at. And I'm going to, go over some of the major things that we have talked about for the last 6 weeks. So send the emails. I responded to a couple of them, but basically the way I'm going to respond to your questions from the emails is by answering the questions and covering the stuff that you have questions about in the midterm review, okay? So I'll try and clarify anything that you're not clear on, and if there was something that you missed and you asked about it, I will explain it briefly again, okay? So for now, we have a quiz on Friday. Same thing, same drill, 10 o'clock, 10 minutes. You know how to do it. It's going to be on the cyber campus. The date will be the 16th, and our exam is on 23rd. One student asked me about the cyber campus. It said, the 20th to the 26th or something. That was mislabeled. That's been corrected. So the midterm review lecture will be open from the 20th to the 26th, okay? And I'm gonna do it next Sunday, like I usually do. I'm gonna record on Sunday and upload it on Sunday, and the link will be available before Tuesday. But from the 20th to the 26th, you need to log in for 30 minutes, okay? And listen to the recorded lecture for the midterm review. So this Friday, this material is the last of the section for quiz number 3. There'll be a lecture this Friday, and then there'll be a midterm review, okay? And that will be all of the material from the first half of the course. So let's get into it. Today we're going to get to Queen Elizabeth. That's the goal. And then we'll probably save the 17th century, most of the 17th century stuff for on Friday after the quiz, so that there's not too much to handle. So we talked about religion last time. Now you may notice in the textbook that it talks about religion first, and then it sort of goes back in time to when Henry VIII goes through the whole process of making those religious changes, or not making them all, but starting the process. So a lot of this stuff has been chronological, but we will start to talk about topics that are not in order of time, okay? So the first thing in the chapter you need to know is about the religious stuff, which we did last lecture. And then it goes back in time and talks about a very important writer named Thomas More. Now, Thomas More was Catholic, and he was a public official and a lawyer. He wrote a book called Utopia, and you probably have heard the term utopia. The book itself, if you read it, you wouldn't recognize it as utopian, because utopia means a sort of idealistic society. But if you read Utopia, where the word comes from, the name of the island, imaginary island, where Raphael Halliday has written he's a fictional character that Thomas More created. He's told this story about this imaginary island. It's remarkably similar to Britain, to England in many ways, in shape. And there's some allegorical, clearly some comparisons between, Tudor England and this imaginary island state that he's created. But to him, it's ideal. They don't have property or possessions. They're very pious and respectful of each other. And the society is very, it's very organized. It's very stable. And there's no tyrant king going around turning religion upside down and killing off his wives or replacing them and killing, important people who he disagrees with. And that's Henry VIII. That's basically the way he behaves. As he gets older, he becomes more tyrannical, and everybody sort of has to tiptoe around. If you cross him, he kills you. He has you executed. He has you imprisoned and then executed. That's what happens to Thomas More. Thomas More is a devout Catholic. He refuses to recognize Henry VIII as the leader of the church. He is loyal to the Catholic doctrine and believes that the changes that Henry has made are heretical. And of course, Henry VIII cannot stand that. So even though Thomas More is extremely intelligent, internationally famous, he writes in Latin, so everybody can read his stuff all the way, across Europe. And he served the king. He's the chancellor. He is a very important. He's the royal chancellor, not when he is executed, but previously. And he just refuses to make this oath to recognize, doesn't make the promise that he's required to do. All English people are required to recognize Henry VIII as the head of the new English church, and he won't do that. Several other famous, important people in the church also refuse, and they are killed. So that's what happens to Thomas More. So the description there, 1535 is the year after the Act of Supremacy. 1534 is when Henry gets his divorce and he makes his own church. And then a year later, Thomas More refuses to recognize him and participate in the Anglican Church, and so he is executed. There's an interesting picture there too in the book of a Puritan family. You can see they're super serious about they're discussing the Bible in the picture, and nobody's smiling. It's just these children crowded around the mother, and the father, ostensibly teaching some concept from the Bible. Okay? So there's Thomas More, famous English writer. Now, one of the things that's going to change is that people are going to stop writing in Latin and they're going to start writing in English. Shakespeare is at the end of the century. Thomas More is at the beginning of the 16th century. He's writing in Latin for an international audience. And at the end of the 16th century, Shakespeare and all his buddies, ladies and gentlemen who also write, Spencer and Sidney and Marlowe and Johnson, there's a long list. You probably don't know many of them, but there's a huge group of writers, of English literary geniuses that come of age at the end of the 16th century. And they all write in English. And Latin stops being the language that they communicate in. This is partly because Henry VIII has disconnected England from the Catholic Church. That was one of the reasons everything was done in Latin, was because of the Catholic Church. When England stops being Catholic, they stop using Latin for everything. Okay, Henry VIII himself, as I said, he could have been a pope. He knew 6 languages, including Greek and Latin. So he wrote in Latin as well. A very intelligent man, just a little bit out of control. So he marries Catherine, as I explained, divorces her, and then marries a woman called Anne of Boleyn, who he had some sort of affair with her older sister. So this is kind of, what can I say? Sketchy stuff. It's not, he's not following the regular rules and behaviors of, courtship per se. He's kind of making his own rules, and that's what Henry VIII does. If he doesn't like the rules, he changes them. So he divorces Catherine of Aragon, and then she, continues to live her life and passes away of natural causes. But his new wife, Anne of Boleyn, is young and energetic and very Protestant. And she, they get married, and she has a baby, and the baby is Elizabeth, future Queen Elizabeth. But nobody knows that at this point. If you watch the movie or anything else, there'll be some sort of, retroactive celebration of how great Queen Elizabeth is going to be. Nobody knows at all. Everybody's disappointed. Everybody wants a son, not just Henry. Okay, he's the most disappointed, and he doesn't even hide it this time. When Mary was born or other children were born, he sort of pretended, oh, it'll be okay, then we'll try again. This time, he's obviously unhappy. Their relationship goes south quick. Anne is very independent. She's sort of like you might say, a model of a, proto-feminist type. Doesn't follow authority very well, and has her own ideas, and she's very strong-willed. This doesn't go over well with Henry, and she gets accused of cheating on him, which she probably didn't, but she makes jokes about him behind his back, and hangs out with some other men, and Henry uses this as an excuse, or he's really angry, to get rid of her. So he accuses her of infidelity, which is cheating on him, and she's killed. She gets executed. So Elizabeth doesn't have a good shot here at being queen. First of all, she's got an older sister, and her older sister is from a legitimate first marriage to a Spanish princess, and Elizabeth's mother is not an important woman. She's the sister of one of the ladies in waiting of Catherine of Aragon. So she's kind of like her mother's kind of like a servant. She's not a high status person. So the chances of her becoming the queen are very slim, and then they get slimmer when Henry marries a third time, and his wife, Jane Seymour, gives birth to a boy, Edward, which coincidentally is my son's name. Not because of that Edward, just because I liked the name Edward. But Edward means guardian of wealth. That's what the meaning of that. It's a very popular king or prince's name. There's been many Edwards. This particular Edward is Edward the Sixth. So he is now first in line, and then Mary, and then Elizabeth. But Elizabeth's not even in line because she's been removed from the inheritance, and so is Mary. So they have to reinstate them later because the divorces sort of cancel out their inheritance to the crown, but they have to fix that later. So now it's Edward. Now there's a baby boy. Jane Seymour dies in giving birth. She gets an infection and she dies. So now he doesn't have a queen again. He's got 3 children from 3 different wives. And this is why the Tudors are so interesting to people, is because of this. It's 3 different queens, 3 different children, and they all have different characters, and they're all connected to different important people in England. So it's a bit of a drama. He marries again, doesn't work out, he marries Catherine Howard. She's very obviously cheating on him and behaving inappropriately. So she gets taken care of too. There's a German princess who comes, she's another Anne. He tries to marry her, doesn't work out. He's not impressed with her. When she comes over from Germany, he doesn't want to have anything to do with her. So that marriage just kind of gets annulled. They give her some money and she goes back home. Catherine Howard is disrespectful and also independent and blatantly cheats on the king. So when she gets caught, she gets removed. She's gone. And then he marries his sixth wife, who survives him. She takes care of him, and she's fairly motherly and just, at that point, Henry's starting to get old. He's overweight, he's sick, and he's not in good condition. So she just kind of supports him. And then Henry dies. Okay? So he ends up having 6 wives in the end. The last 3 really aren't that important. We can't memorize all of the wives. The first 3 are important. Catherine of Aragon because of Mary, and Anne Boleyn because of Elizabeth, and Jane Seymour because of Edward. So when he dies, his son Edward becomes king. And Edward is very Protestant. Basically, we skim over him a lot because there's not enough time and I have to focus on Elizabeth. But Edward's not that healthy. He's kind of a weak child, and so he's a boy, and he's kind of controlled by powerful older men, uncles basically, and relatives that act on his behalf because he's a boy. But he's Protestant. He's been sort of raised as a Protestant, so he's anti-Catholic, and he keeps the Reformation going, and he starts things like grammar schools. He starts founding these schools, which later will become public education. So he has a short, 5-year period of being boy king, but he does have some influence on society. So that's why we talk about him. More importantly, though, he dies. So he never gets to become really an adult, and we never get to see what he would really be like as an independent, adult, ruler. So he dies, and his older sister Mary becomes queen. There's some fighting and some attempt by Edward's cousin to take over. We won't get into that, but basically Mary wins. She appeals to her right, as the next in line, as an adult Tudor, directly descended from Henry VIII, that she has the right to be the queen. And London decides that's who they want. They're going to regret it, but that's what they decide. So she becomes queen. She marries Philip, Prince Philip of Spain. Philip II, he'll become King Philip. He's Catholic, and she marries him. They're related. The English people are not happy about this because people have started to become Protestant, and they don't want to be ruled by a Catholic king from Spain. So he's not given authority. He has to rule as a consort, like her assistant, and he has really no power over the government and the people of England. They don't allow him to have it. So he leaves. And poor Queen Mary, at this point I'll say poor, she wants to have a baby, and her husband leaves the country. So it's impossible. She's almost 40. She's not young. She's a middle-aged woman now. Actually, late middle-aged. Once you get to 40 in the 16th century, you're getting close to your expected life. The life expectancy is like 45. So, she's got to have a baby soon, or she won't be able to physically. And he leaves. So she's basically hoping for a miracle. And she's Catholic, so she does hope for a miracle, but she's very aggressive about Catholic religion, and she starts trying to, wind back the clock and make England Catholic again. So all these Catholics start appearing and saying, I'm still Catholic, but the majority of the people don't really want to become Catholic again, mostly because all that land from the Catholic Church, Henry took it and he sold it. And all of these wealthy English people have land and have property and have money that was taken from the Catholic Church. And not surprisingly, they don't want to give it back. So the Catholic Church doesn't have the abbeys and monasteries and churches and priests and monks and clerics that they used to have, like they used to, as we said, in the 14th century. Every community had a parish. Every community was built around the church. The church had many different functions, but those things have been taken away. The wealth has been taken away. The trained people have gone into different professions. The land has been given to English people who are Protestant. So it's not easy for her. She would have to rebuild the Catholic Church, which would be really expensive. And she doesn't have any money because her father spent it all. So this is where the financial problem continues to come back again and again, because for various reasons, the crown does not have enough money to pay for what it needs to do. So she can't have a baby, and she can't restore the Catholic Church, at least not easily. It's going to take a long time and a lot of money. And then she gets sick and she dies. So now it's Elizabeth's turn. And really, they just kind of let her know that her sister is dying, and then her sister dies, and Elizabeth has been locked in the Tower of London. She's been like a prisoner for years and years, and creepy old men, powerful old men, have made advances on her and tried to, get her on their side politically, but probably, physically, sexually harassed her as well. So she survived this, though. She's very smart. She writes and she gently manipulates and rejects some of these older men's advances. And her older sister, for her, fortunately, dies. And they come one day, unlock the door, and say, "Your sister's dead. You're the queen. Come with me." And so she's 25 years old, and she's supposedly beautiful. We don't really know, but probably. Her father, the portraits don't show them looking attractive. If you look at any paintings, she's pretty enough, but not something I would consider very flattering. I think the portraits are fairly realistic. Henry looks really unhealthy in his pictures. He looks like a big giant man who has definitely eaten too much. And as I mentioned, he had a broken leg when he was younger. So he's kind of standing awkwardly, and he looks like a gigantic Hulk. And he has giant head. And you can see Mary and Edward on either side of him, and they both look pretty pale and unattractive. But Elizabeth was supposed to be beautiful. She enhanced her beauty with a lot of cosmetics, and she frequently wore gold, and she had bright red hair. So you can imagine just seeing from far away this shiny, flaming red-haired queen coming in, a coach. If you were a regular person, it would have been a quite spectacular sight. It would be just like, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Well, they're separated. I shouldn't use his example. We'll say Robert Downey Jr. pulling up in, a yellow Lamborghini, and there's a whole bunch of people, and he comes out with his sunglasses on, and everybody makes a big fuss about him. That's basically what Queen Elizabeth did. She went around in her coach with beautiful white horses and these impressive, expensive dresses, and she performed the role of this mythical figure. She was referred to often as Gloriana, Okay, Gloriana is just her fantasy name. When she logs in, she would they would refer to her in literature as Gloriana, and everybody knew they were talking about Elizabeth, but they wouldn't call her Elizabeth; they called her Gloriana. So she made this kind of cult of worshiping this virgin queen because she never marries, and supposedly she never had any intimate experiences with men, but we don't really know that either. But she never married, so she claimed to be married to England. She gave her body, her soul, and her wealth and her time, and was completely committed to the state. And so it was hard for anybody to protest against that kind of sacrifice. She was very good at controlling the men around her. Powerful men competed with each other for Elizabeth's favor, and that's how she ran the country. Because a woman was not supposed to be in charge of the country at this point, right? She's not supposed to. She's supposed to marry. She's supposed to have children, and there's supposed to be a king. But she changes the rules, just like her father. Makes new rules. I'm never gonna marry. I'm never going to hand over, my power to somebody else. And the reason is because I'm so dedicated to England, to the kingdom. That's why. Okay? She makes a number of amazing speeches in really difficult situations and overcomes them through her intellectual and political savvy. She's a very intelligent woman. She should probably be called Elizabeth the Great. But again, because she's a woman, she didn't get that title. But I would say she belongs in the same category as Alfred or Canute, those two kings that we talked about earlier in the semester, who got that epithet. So she becomes a queen, and she manages, even though she's young and she's a vulnerable woman, she manages to elevate herself above everybody and make everybody else compete for her patronage, her support. So there's these, always these men doing things for her, and that's how she manages the country. She has a chronic money problem. So whenever she has a money problem, she has to summon Parliament, partly because she's a woman, but partly because this has sort of become a thing now from Magna Carta, that the king needs the support of the wealthy, representative people in society, and those people attend Parliament. And this is it's a false statement to say that Parliament was some sort of organization that was created to limit the power of the king or the queen. That's not the case. Parliament was created to parler, as you say in French, to talk. What the kings did was bring Parliament into London so that they could organize the country. Now, though, the queen is summoning them to persuade them to give her money because she doesn't have enough money to run the country, especially when they start to have conflict with Spain. So this is a complete reversal. 100 years before, in the 1490s, in the early 16th century, that's when Catherine of Aragon was promised to Arthur by Henry VII, and the English and Spanish became allies. But gradually, partly because of the marriage thing with Catherine of Aragon, and then Bloody Mary killing everybody who wasn't Catholic, the Spanish and the English start to hate each other, right? The people themselves, they feel like they're opposites. Spain is now a rich empire. They've been growing their empire for 100 years. They're not on the same level. England is, in the movie again, they say, oh, and when Elizabeth died, England was the most powerful country on earth, and she was the greatest queen. No, that's not the case. England has lost all of its territory in France. It struggles financially, and Queen Elizabeth, although she's a great leader, she's managing it despite the disadvantage that England has. England's not a powerful country. You can see that it's starting to turn the corner and become a strong nation, but not yet, especially when Elizabeth is at her coronation, when she's 25. When she's old, England is starting to become more important. But when she takes over from her sister, it's a backwater. It's not a significant European power, let alone global power. But Spain is a superpower. They've discovered America, they've colonized South America, and they've got mountains of gold and silver coming in. So there's many people that are really important. This is why you can study 16th century literature and 16th century culture for your whole life and still have more to read and more to understand. But this is the age of exploration. So the English start to compete with the Spanish. This is one of the most important things about British culture, is that it's a blue ocean strategy. It's a naval strategy. They start to pirate. They start to send out privateers that steal. Somebody's moving a cart right outside my window. Wonderful timing. They start to steal the gold and the silver and the shipments and the trade. They start to prey on Spanish shipping. And they also want to participate. They want to sell slaves, which is a horrible reality of the 16th century, that people are transporting, taking people from Africa, essentially kidnapping them and transporting them to the Americas to work on plantations. They're going to develop sugar and cotton and other products and luxury goods, and they're going to use this labor for that. And there's a lot of money to be made. So the English start trafficking in slaves. They start transporting slaves and selling them to the Spanish colonies, and undercutting the Spanish and the Portuguese. The Spanish don't like this, so they threaten England first, and this goes on for a while. And Queen Elizabeth pretends like she doesn't know what's going on, but she's secretly building ships and providing ships and giving money. And when Francis Drake or John Hawkins or any of the other famous sailors do anything, they steal something, they capture a Spanish ship, they give her a portion of the profit. She gets a cut every time. Every time these, crazy, independent, out of control, bandit pirates that she doesn't associate with, every time they do this, and the King of Spain, who is Philip II, her older sister's ex-husband, he knows what's going on, and he pretends until it becomes a bigger problem. He kind of ignores it, but through a series of important events, he decides that he's going to put an end to English interference, and that he wants England to be Catholic again. He wants, so he gathers huge amounts of money and men, and he creates the Spanish Armada. He builds hundreds of ships and puts thousands of men on them, and he sends the Spanish Armada to destroy Queen Elizabeth. They're going to land in England and Kent, or the southern part of England. They're going to get ferried across. The Duke of Parma is waiting to get picked up, and the Armada is going to transport this huge army, and they're going to crush the English, and that would be the end of Queen Elizabeth. So they know that's coming, and the English Navy assembles with Francis Drake, which the Spanish, this guy is a famous pirate and causes a lot of problems for the Spanish. They call him El Draco, the dragon. And he is leading with John Hawkins, who is his cousin. They lead the Navy, and they're so confident. This is an interesting little story. They're so confident that they're going to be able to beat the Spanish, even though the Spanish have this enormous flotilla, hundreds of ships that are huge and have many more men. The English have faster, better equipped ships with better sailors. And Hawkins and Drake are supposedly bowling, doing lawn bowling, and they hear that the Spanish are on their way, and they say, "Oh, I think we have time to finish this game before we go down and defeat the Spanish." So they finish their game, and then they go down on their ships and they sail, and they attack with some fire ships, and they engage the Spanish, and the Spanish are unable to pick up the army, and they're defeated in a battle, and then they're unable to pick up their army and complete their mission, so they decide that they need to sail back to Spain. And the only way to do that, because they're in the English Channel, is to go around England and then around Scotland and come down Ireland in the Atlantic Ocean and back to Spain. This turns out to be a big mistake, but they don't have a choice because the English are behind them. So they go in the North Sea, and an enormous storm blows in out of the North Sea and smashes the ships to bits. So there's only a small number of the Spanish ships that make it back to Spain. This becomes a legend. It's the same sort of situation as when the Mongols invaded Japan, and there was a storm that came and destroyed the Mongol ships when Kublai Khan tried to invade Japan. And the Japanese call that kamikaze, right? Kamikaze. And that's the divine wind in Japanese. And I know Koreans don't often like to compare, Japanese historical events with other things, but it's a very similar event. The same thing happens. Storm comes in, smashes the Spanish, and protects England, damages the Spanish effort so that they're unable to invade the island. And so they call this the Protestant wind, okay? And so the English will be supported in their belief that they are special, and that Queen Elizabeth is protected by God, and that God is a Protestant Englishman, that they are right and the Catholics are wrong. What happens in the battle and what happens with nature itself supports their idea that they are a chosen people and that their destiny is to be victorious over Catholics, and that they will grow into a great nation. So obviously Queen Elizabeth takes advantage of this. She makes coins that say God blows and the Spanish were dispersed. They have special coins made and ceremonies, and church bells are rung all over England. And this is why people look back to the Elizabethan age and say, yes, that's where British culture started to develop and started its upward, trend to greatness started to be an important place. And to a certain extent, that's true, but they will fight the Spanish for the rest of Queen Elizabeth's life. And actually the results is kind of ambiguous. Spain and England sort of just fought each other to a standstill. The English lost lots of money and people, soldiers and ships, and so did the Spanish. It was inconclusive. The English didn't really win. They just stopped the Spanish from taking over England in the end. But this Spanish Armada the defeat of the Spanish Armada is legendary. It is legendary globally, not just in England, because it was a turning point. And now we can see at this point, England is on the upward curve and Spain has started to turn downwards, and it will gradually lose its influence and become less important for the rest of European history. Whereas England will continue to get more powerful until the middle of the 20th century. Okay, so there is something also going on at the same time. You're going to have to read some of this stuff because I don't have time to talk about it too much in detail right now. But Shakespeare happens. There's all kinds of important people. Some of them are explorers, adventurers. Some of them are playwrights. Some of them are court officials. Some of them are naval officers and generals. There is this cohort of people that grow up in the sphere of Queen Elizabeth, and she provides the support for these things. Like I said, she supports the Navy. She whatever adventures or piracy or plans that Hawkins and Drake do, she's behind them. When there's architecture, when there's building projects, and there's events, dramas, plays, poetry, fashion, all these things Queen Elizabeth is involved in. And she's the great patron. She's a woman, so she's a matron, but you know what I mean? She's supporting the whole chain of activities. And this is why we call it the Elizabethan age. Because she's so important in encouraging this environment for all of these people who are talented to accomplish great things. Shakespeare is one of those people. He's undeniably one of the most important people in English history, not just because of what he did in his age, but because subsequently, looking backwards again, people have taken Shakespeare and made it so important in education and emphasized the elements that he decided to elevate. This questioning of religion and this humanistic strain of thought, the intellectualism, the historical perspective. He writes a whole series of histories. He writes comedies. He writes romances. He influences all of us in our perception of English culture, because when you think of English romance, you think of Romeo and Juliet. When you think of English history, you think of Richard III, the Richards, the Henrys. He writes about all these people, and this is where one of our sources for what the 16th century was like and what the 15th century was like. Shakespeare communicates the culture to us through drama. So he's among others very important in this flowering of English literature. Another part of this is the English Common Book of Prayer and the King James Bible. But we won't get into the King James Bible because that happens after Elizabeth dies. And the next section in the chapter is about the Civil War and the 17th century. So I've talked as quickly as possible, tried to get as many ideas in as I could, but stop at page 113. That's the line for the quiz, okay? When it starts talking about the English Civil War there, that's not on the quiz. I will cover that on Friday, okay? So we'll finish the chapter on Friday so that we can get all of chapter 3 into the midterm. But for quiz number 3, don't worry about the 17th century. Stop at the end at Shakespeare and the flowering of English literature in the book, and we'll do our quiz, and then we'll move on from there. Again, please ask me any questions. I know there's a lot of material to think of and to keep straight. Like I said, for the midterm, I'll give you a little study guide, which will emphasize certain things that you should look for to prepare yourself. But the quiz will go forward before that, and then we'll move on to the midterm stuff. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Enjoy the weather and stay safe.